Hi, welcome to Angels Plus. I'm Steve, and this week we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do with some spare foam that you might have sitting around, some sponge material. We seem to use this a lot in our hatchery, and so I'm going to give you a few tips on what you can do with it for your own fish room. Okay, first thing I'd like to go over is these marina breeding boxes. This is something that we use a lot in our fish room, and the way these things come standard, there is this very small little gate here that keeps fry from coming out of the box, only it tends to clog easily. It tends to also let some of the bigger fry or smaller fry get through. So one of the things that we like to do is we create a little bit of a filter there using our scrap foam here. And with a pair of scissors, you can cut this foam very, very easily. And what you do is you always, whenever you're going to use your foam, cut it to fit a little bit oversized in the space you're putting it in, because it compresses very easily into a small space. But if it's too big, or if the piece is too small and the space is too large, it will not work for you. So basically what you're going to do here in this breeder box is you're just simply going to cut it so that it fits tightly into this little section right here. And I'll do that for you right now very quickly. We'll just do a rough cut here. And this dimension here, the width is the most important one here. And then we'll just simply cut this off. And the scissors work quite well for cutting this foam. And then basically you're going to take this little gate out because you don't need it, and you're going to put this foam right into this little cavity right here, so that it sits there like that, and you're all set. Now you've got a much larger surface area here for water to go into, be filtered out before it goes out there. It doesn't tend to clog as easy. And it tends to stay in place. Fry don't go through it, under it, or around it, and you can very easily pull it out, rinse it out, put it back in within a couple of seconds. So that's one use that we really like to use it for. These breeder boxes, you can also use them as filters. If you take your piece of foam and you cut it so that it's approximately, a 1/4 of an inch too wide for this space, you can actually fill these boxes with a piece of foam. Now, I didn't cut this one to fit, but you can see how that would work here. You basically could put as many of these slices in here as you wanted to, actually have fish between them, and then the foam would act as a filter as the water comes up the lift tube, goes through the foam, and then out here. And then you would end up with a combination breeder box and filter all in one, just by using some scrap foam like this. All right, another item that we use a lot in our fish room are clay pots, and typically we're putting plants in these clay pots, and they all have a hole in the bottom. That hole tends to let gravel come out, because what our technique for raising our plants is to put some gravel in there, put the plant in there, fill it back up with gravel, and gravel falls out the bottom, and gravel tends to be pushed out the top by bristlenose and things like that. So what we do is we take another piece of this scrap foam, and you can take your scissors once again, and you can cut it into a more of a rounded figure, so that it actually fits into the bottom of your pot here. And you can be careful with that if you want to, and make it fit the bottom perfectly. So you've got this foam in the bottom, and what that does is that when you put your gravel in here, it keeps it from coming out the top. So we would basically put that plug of foam in the bottom, put some gravel in there with the plant roots, and then usually what I'll do then is, to keep the gravel in the pot or sand or whatever you're using, is I'll get another plug of foam where I make a round circle here and cut it out, and just have a hole for the plant to come through. And that's pretty easy to do if you just simply take your pot upside down on your scrap foam and then just cut it out like that. That way the top piece will fit in there kind of snug. And so it keeps the gravel from coming out the top, and it keeps the bristlenose from getting in here, or any other fish from picking the gravel out and spraying it around your tank bottom. Now, if you've got gravel in your tank bottom, then you probably don't care too much about that. But if you have bare bottom tanks like us, we don't like the gravel all over the place. It just gets something in the way that we end up siphoning down the drain and clogging up our traps and things like that. So we use these clay pots a lot, and we use the foam plugs on that. You can actually turn this into a sponge filter very easily if you'd like to. Put a small hole, a little slice in the middle of this foam so your lift tube can go through it. Make it round so it fits the bottom of this, and put that in there. Your lift tube's going down the center of it, and in fact I'll cut a little slice in there. You just take a sharp knife and you just basically poke a hole in it where you want that lift tube to go, and it'll form to that lift tube. You force it in there, it'll seal right around the edges, very nice, just from a slice from a knife. And then assuming that this we'll even cut this quickly to be somewhat round here. It really, you'll see how easily it is to do this without being very accurate. So if this fits in tight, you can trim that up so it fits in there quite nicely. And you can basically do that to 4, 5, 6 layers. Put the lift tube down into the bottom. Make sure the very bottom piece of foam is up off the floor of the pot, maybe a 1/4 inch or so. And so you've got them all stacked in there nicely, and you got your air line going through the top of the lift tube right here in this hole. And that will act as a sponge filter, a sizable sponge filter, and you're basically just using scrap pieces of foam. And you can put smaller PPI foam at the bottom and larger at the top, or the other way around. You could put the smaller at the top, and then every week or two you'd take just the top piece off and rinse that out, because that would catch most of the debris, and the other pieces would stay active, and they would not clog as easily. So that's another use for these clay pots, or any other container. You could use a 1-gallon jar. Do the same thing. If your scrap foam is big enough, you can turn it into a giant 1-gallon filter, which is going to be big enough to filter a very large amount of water. All right, the next item that we use in our fish room in some occasions, and a lot of people don't even know what these are anymore, but this is a little box filter. This is something that was very common in the hobby when I was young. I hate to admit how long ago that was, but it was a couple years ago, and they're still very useful if you've got them hanging around. And quite honestly, you can fill this up with carbon, zeolite, you can put sand in it, gravel, whatever you want, use it as a filter. But one of the nice things you can do is you can, once again, take this out, cut your little foam plugs to fit this, and you can put in different sizes and fill that right up with foam if you want to. Put the little hole in for your lift tube, put the top back on, you've got yourself basically a sponge filter all contained in an old style box filter. So you can turn these box filters. They came in all sizes and shapes. Some were really large, some were rectangular, some were round. But once again, you can take these scrap foam pieces and turn these into very useful sponge filters, modern day sponge filters, if you will, without the hassle of having to change carbon or any of that type of thing. Okay, another item that's frequently found in fish tanks and hatcheries, fish rooms, is the lift tubes to power filters, canister filters. Maybe you've got some type of fill and drain system on a hatchery, or a sump or something like that. And typically you're going to have a lift tube coming down into the tank, some kind of a little sieve that supposedly keeps fry and things from going up there. But the holes are always too big, and they always suck up anything small in the tank. And one thing you can do here is very easily, rather than try to cut a hole in a piece of sponge and try to get it to fit over the top of that, sometimes it's easier to just take it and wrap one of these scrap pieces of foam around it, put a couple rubber bands on it, and now you've got this thing protected by a piece of foam. And it keeps, the foam is much better at keeping fry from being sucked up, and yet you can still keep it useful as a power filter, moving a lot of water per hour, and yet not entrapping small fry or other debris that you can. Once again, it also acts as a sponge filter on the end of that. So, the bigger the piece you use, the greater the sponge filter, the sponge filtration will be on it. All right, and one of the most frequent things we do with these is we use them as scrub pads. They are, like those no-scratch Teflon scrubby pads. Well, these are even better. This, especially this 15 PPI, it's very coarse, yet it doesn't scratch your glass. It lasts forever. Great for cleaning the tanks. We've got these things scattered all over the hatchery. Use them constantly for scrubbing. And the other thing that I want to mention here is you can not only cut these with scissors very easily, but if you need a very straight edge because you want it to be very accurately fitting inside of some rectangular box, or maybe you're going to cut it so it fits inside of a power filter, or you could even, some of those outside power filters, they have little cartridges that go in them for filtration, and some of those cartridges have removable media, and you could cut these down to put inside there, and it doesn't matter if they fit perfectly because you can piece these things together and they work just as good if you've got two of them pushed side by side as if you just got one big piece. They're all full of holes anyway, so it makes no difference as long as the water flows through it. But if you want to take one of these pieces and cut it smaller and do it accurately, all it really takes is a straight edge, like so. Anything that's got a straight edge to it. This is just a regular old piece of scrap wood, and a very sharp knife. We take the sharp knife, mark it where you want it cut, and then you just have to run this thing through the foam, and a couple passes, and it really cuts it down very, very easily. Very nice straight edge to it. So get a nice sharp knife, and you can cut this very, very easily to the size that you would like it to be at. Okay, now if you don't have this reticulated foam sitting around as a scrap, we will offer this on our website. It'll be under miscellaneous foam that you can purchase, and what we do is we're going to sell it at actually a much lower cost than our normal foam cost is. Normally you're paying somewhere around 4 cents a cubic inch for foam of this quality. And we're going to have this down in the 2 cents a cubic inch area. So you get a group of foam that is 100 cubic inches like this for a couple of bucks. It's not very expensive at all. And you can just let your imagination run wild on this. You can use it for all kinds of things that I didn't even go into on this video because, like I said, we use it for just dozens of different things. But it is a very, very useful thing to have in your fish room. Okay, that wraps it up this week for our little tutorial, and we're going to offer you a little coupon code at the bottom of the screen at the end of the video that will give you 40% off adult angelfish. So anything that's labeled as large or adult on our website for the following week or week to 10 days is going to be 40% off. So we appreciate you stopping by and watching the video. We'll catch you next time. Thanks.